Swanee, God has smiled on the Gators, no question about it.
All right, Gator fans. So in this video, we're going to be doing a preview, not a preview per se, but what I think are going to be the most important games for Florida this upcoming season in the 2026 football calendar. This isn't going to be like a prediction or anything like that. I'm just talking about which games matter, which I think matter most for Florida and why. I know that we're getting ready to see Florida go into the SEC tournament coming up. I'm going to do a video about how their season has stacked up so far. But considering that we're getting further and further into the spring portion of the football off season and the spring games coming up in April, I wanted to make sure to do some football videos to get back into the rhythm of posting Gator football content, because that's what this channel was originally was. I'm just using basketball as a way to kill time up until then because, well, there's no football to go on. So hey, at least support the Gators for their basketball and baseball team. But anyways, Florida has their FBS schedule already mapped out. They play Florida Atlantic. They play, pulling up the schedule right here. They play Florida Atlantic. They play Campbell. They play Auburn, and then they got Ole Miss, and then they got the Ole Miss, and then Missouri, and then South Carolina. Then they got Texas. Then they have. And after the Texas game, they get a bye week. They play Georgia. They play Oklahoma. They play Kentucky, Vanderbilt, and Florida State. And I'm going to tell you which one of those games are going to have my attention, which games I think are going to have the most attention, or at least give me the biggest idea of how this Florida team is going to fare out. Now, granted, a couple of these games is like later on in the year, so you probably will have a good idea about what the Florida football team will be. But I still wanted to cover that and see what it is about each game that presents a new, different challenge to Florida. So, I'm trying to pull up Florida's schedule right here on FBS. There you go. Oh, wait. Okay, there you go. Got it pulled up right here. So, these are the 5 games that I am looking forward to the most for Florida. We're going to go from 5 through 1. At number 5, I got Kentucky. Now, you're probably thinking, well, Florida, you probably have bigger games other than Kentucky, but to me, this one has more significance than it usually does. The reason why I say that is because, well, I'm tired of seeing Florida get pushed around by Kentucky. You know, when I was a kid growing up, I went my entire childhood without witnessing a loss to Kentucky on the football field. There have been times where it got close. You know, 2014 triple overtime, 2017 they got even closer, and they eventually broke the streak in Dan Mullen's first season. But ever since then, it just seemed like Kentucky just realized that Florida is not going to stand up to them physically, and just not going to stand up to them, and just has really been testing Florida's manhood ever since that streak was broken. Even in the game that Florida won 2019, they were dominating Florida until Felipe Franks got hurt, and then all of a sudden Kyle Trask comes in, and the trajectory of that game just completely got turned on its head. I'm sick of seeing Florida get pushed around by these guys, because it used to go from, well, Florida's going to beat Kentucky, but it's by how many possessions? 2 possessions, 3 possessions, 4 possessions. It's not like that anymore. Kentucky has gone from being bullied to the bully in this matchup. They've gone from being the nail to now being the hammer in this matchup. What they did to Florida last November, it made the 2023 loss look like thumb wrestling. Like, Ray Davis was running up and down all over Florida for like 300 yards and made Florida look silly. Kentucky just beat Florida from pillar to post throughout the entire game last season. It looked like Florida wasn't even ready. It didn't even show up to play. It's like Florida took the lead against Kentucky, and then after that, it was Kentucky the rest of the way. It's like, when are you going to see some fight against the Wildcats from Florida, which is something I never thought I had to say. It used to be like, oh, we're going to eat those dudes for lunch, dinner, and maybe save some for breakfast tomorrow. That's what it used to be when Florida played Kentucky. It's not like that anymore. And you're gonna be back on the road at Kentucky, because you were on the road last year, and you're gonna be back on the road this time. And you're gonna see Kentucky for the next 4 years because of the SEC's 3-6-6 model. And Kentucky, Florida drew as their one of those 3 annual opponents. So you're going to see Kentucky on for the next 4 years anyway. Do you really want to have Kentucky continue to be the thorn in the side for Florida? I don't think so. And for John Summerall, he should probably have the highlights of what Kentucky has been doing to Florida on loop heading into that game. Because the players that are on the Florida team that have been there through those Kentucky beatdowns, they should be sick and tired of seeing the dudes in the blue and white. And they should really step up and play against Kentucky the way Florida is expected to play against Kentucky. And they have a new head coaching now, Will Stein, a former offensive coordinator from Oregon. He's not John Summerall. John Summerall is going to be in his first year coaching his third different college football program. Will Stein is going to be his first year as a head coach overall. So you should theoretically have the advantage John Summerall should have in coaching experience in that wise. I have the Kentucky game at number 5. Number 4, I got Missouri. Now, what is it about this Missouri game that I think is a little tricky? Number 1, it's in Columbia, Missouri. It's on the road. It can get cold there at times. It's been a tricky matchup for Florida when it comes to Missouri. It's been a weird matchup between the two. There's always crazy, wacky nonsense going on that between these two teams when they step on the field. Florida has only won in Columbia, Missouri twice, 2015 and 2019. They've been close the last 2 times they played in Missouri. 2021, they lost to Missouri, but that game went to overtime. And then 2023, if Florida just stops Missouri on a 4th and 13 or 4th and 17, they win that game and they make a bowl game that year. Florida's been close to beating Missouri a couple of times. And for the most part, they've been more talented than Missouri has. Eli Drinkwitz has done a great job at Missouri. He's recruited at a higher level than the program has seen in quite some time. And it seems like no matter how often he changes coordinators, they always seem to not miss a beat. They don't have Blake Baker as the defensive coordinator. He went to LSU, but then they still had a pretty good defense last year. It's going to be interesting to see how they transition with different offense coordinators, because the previous offense coordinator, Kirby Moore, went to become the head coach all the way out in Washington State. But this game gives me trap game vibes, meaning trap games as in games that you think could potentially see a loss that you didn't see coming because of who you're playing, where you're playing them, and the time that you're playing them. And to me, that's what's the biggest clue about this game: the time in which you're playing Missouri. Because if I'm gonna pull up Florida's schedule right back up here. So after they play on the road at Auburn and they play at home at Ole Miss, they're going to be on the road in Missouri the following week. But then after that, they got South Carolina and Texas. Well, having Missouri in between that 4-game matchup with a new SEC head coach, a team that made the college football playoff last year, South Carolina, which they're in desperate mode because the players are probably playing for Shane Beamer's job, and a Texas program that has been one of the best in the nation, not just best in the conference, best in the nation for the last 3 or 4 years. Having Mizzou in the middle part of that, to me, it's a very slippery spot for Florida to come across them in. That's a very treacherous spot to put that Missouri game at. Now, not saying it's not impossible, but I think that's a very tricky game for Florida on the road in Columbia. So I have that game at number 4. Texas, I put this game at number 3. I think this is easily the toughest program on Florida's schedule, and I think maybe the most difficult, toughest program on Florida's schedule and the most difficult game. Texas, phenomenal NIL, great recruiting. They've always had superb talent indexes every single year. The coaching has been really good. They've made the playoffs. They have great fan support. And they were a loss to Florida away from making the playoffs last year. I'm sure those players haven't forgotten that, and I'm sure they want revenge. And this game's going to be in Austin. Last time Florida was in Austin, Texas just beat the hell out of them from pillar to post. And I think what's the critical aspect of this game, Arch Manning played a lot better towards the end of the year than he did at the beginning of the year. And I think him having another year under Steve Sarkisian where he's the starter and he's getting the starter reps, I think it means that game is going to slow down for him more and more and more as time goes on. And Steve Sarkisian is obviously one of the best coaches in the SEC. Second, so that game I have at number 3. Number 2, Oklahoma. Now, this is going to be the first time the Oklahoma Sooners will have ever visited the Swamp. What makes this game so tough, it's right after the Georgia game. Give me 1 second, I'll be right back. Give me 1 second, sorry. All right, sorry about that, guys. I had to take a little bit of a break there. So back to what I was talking about. I was talking about the Oklahoma game. Now, what makes the Oklahoma game tough, not just because the fact that Oklahoma is a very good team, very good program. They have a lot of talent on the defensive side of the ball, particularly in the front seven. Brett Venables seems to have found his footing in Norman, but it's coming right after the world's largest outdoor cocktail party, meaning after the Georgia game. Now, I know that it's not going to be exactly like what UGA games usually are because this one's going to be in Atlanta because for some reason the NCAA or SEC or Florida or Georgia can't just simply agree to play on each other's college campuses for the 2 years that they that they are not going to be able to play in Jacksonville. But no matter. Anyways, Georgia has had a history of beating Florida twice in back-to-back weeks, meaning they beat Florida and then Florida loses the following game because they just they get too high-strung off of the loss to Georgia, and they just or it's a blowout and then their confidence is just completely shambled the following week. Kentucky blew out Florida. That was right after the Georgia game last year. Florida lost to Georgia, got blown out by Texas the following week later. Florida lost to Georgia, lost to Arkansas the following week. Too many times Florida has lost the following week after Georgia because they just put so much into that game and so many of the players want to beat Georgia so badly. And having Oklahoma, even if this game is in the Swamp right afterwards, is not an easy opponent to play against. So to me, that's a very important game. How does Florida bounce back from the result? Well, maybe bounce back or at the very least move forward from the UJ game because we don't know if Florida's going to win that game or not. So we'll just say move forward from that the following week. And that one I have number 2. And at this game right here, I have this one at number 1. The reason Auburn. The reason why I think the Auburn game is the most important game on Florida's schedule. And mind you, I made sure to not include Georgia into this conversation because that would just make the conversation be too quick and easy. Auburn because it's on the road. It's in Auburn, one of the toughest venues to play at. And Florida and Auburn, there's still that rivalry that is within both fan bases and both programs. This used to be one of the biggest rivalries in the SEC once upon a time before LSU and Tennessee took off with Florida in terms of Florida's rivalries with them. Because obviously Tennessee and Florida were major rivals in the 90s, and then that carried through into the 2000s. And throughout the 21st century, LSU and Florida has been a back and forth contest. But beforehand, from the 30s to the 80s, if you would ask Florida fans who's their second biggest rival in the conference, they would say Auburn. Who was easily Auburn's third biggest rivalry in the conference outside of Bama and Georgia? It was Florida. And with the 3-6-6 model, you'll see the rivalry a little bit more often on a biannual basis. But from the 1930s in the early years of the SEC to about, I would say maybe the early 2000s, this used to be an annual rivalry every single year. But the problem is the SEC was at 10 teams, but then they went to 12 with the additions of South Carolina and Arkansas. And then they added Texas and A&M and Missouri to make it 14. And then they added Texas and Oklahoma. So it made it hard to keep that rivalry on an annual basis. But with the current model, you'll see every team in the SEC will play each other at least once over a 2-year period. And over a 4-year period, they'll play each other in each person's home stadium outside of neutral site matchups like Florida and Georgia. As far as where the programs are currently, both are have hired new coaches. Again, it seems like they hire new coaches right around the same time every couple of years. Auburn is on I think they're on their 4th coach this decade because they had Gus Malzahn for 2020, and then they went to Brian Harsin, and then they went to Hugh Freeze, and now they're on Alex Golesh. Florida had Dan Mullen for a few years, then they went to Billy Napier, and now they're on John Summerall. So both teams have had bad luck with coaching hires throughout this decade, I should say. So, John Summerall's very first SEC game on the road in a tough environment against a coach in Alex Golesh who beat Florida with South Florida last year. The South Florida Bulls went on the road and beat Florida in the Swamp last year, which practically killed Florida's entire season from that point forward. So he's going to have confidence going up against this Florida team, even if it's with a different coach. It's just, I think it's a very, to me, that's one of the more underrated, I think one of the more underrated SEC matchups of the season. Having two first-year head coaches, one whom already beat the program that he's going to be playing, and another one heading to his third, making his first ever SEC game as a head coach of the SEC, and it's just going to be, I think that's going to be an interesting game to watch. So that's my list for the most important games of Florida's schedule. Auburn 1, Oklahoma 2, Texas 3, Missouri 4, and Kentucky 5. So thank you for listening.